Radio 92.7.
Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7 Action Sports Now. Who says politics and sports pays to mix together? Well, Jamel Hill, the ESPN commentator, has made controversial comments about President Trump is leaving the sports network, according to reports. A buyout of her reported $2.5 million per year contract has been completed, and her last day will be this coming Friday, according to sources that told the New York Post. The UTC women's soccer team earned their third shutout of the season with another 3-0 win at Troy and improved to 3-1 on the year, while the Trojans fell to 1-3 overall. The Mocs will return to Chattanooga to take on Georgia State on Friday night at Finley Stadium. Gates open at 6:00 p.m. with admission free. Red Bank and Signal Mountain will be our high school football game of the week this Friday night at Signal Mountain High School. Then on Thursday night, join Keon Rose, Nick LaFew, and others for the Gridiron Gang Show from Starbucks at 10 North on the North Shore. Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7 Action Sports Now.
Nuga Radio.
Are you brain dead? Still voting for pathetic liberals? Take 3 hours of Sean Hannity from 3 to 6.
Nuga Radio.
Then call us in the morning between 9 and 11.
92.7.
Nuga Radio.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good people in the city of Chattanooga. It's a beautiful day outside. I hope you had a great weekend and you're ready to get it in with me on the Marie Mott Show. Y'all know what it is. I'm taking it from the streets to City Hall, from City Hall to the mayor's office. Can't leave out the police department. From the valley low to the mountaintop, giving you guys a bird's eye view to what's going on in the city of Chattanooga. Good morning to you. I hope you're having a great day. And as always, if you wake up in the morning, you're doing all right because somebody didn't wake up this morning. So even if your day didn't start too well, be encouraged. It's a sunshiny day, which should be a reminder that if you keep on holding on, keep on pushing forward, you're going to encounter some rain like we did last week, some cloudy days, but the sun is always behind the clouds. So I hope that I can uplift you, that we can have a serious conversation today. The conversation that we're going to have today on the show was intended for last week's show, but I am going to, I split my show between community and much needed conversation, because a lot of the things that we talk about, you're not going to hear it on social media very often, unless it's just in a post-reactive, negative kind of sense. You're definitely not going to hear it on other radio stations. You're not going to hear a lot of what I talk about or what I bring up or discuss on television or just about anywhere else. The purposes of my show is to have a conversation with you, the listener. And why? Because in order for us to change what's going on the outside, we have to change what's going on the inside, whether it's things that we have, things that we're holding on to in our hearts or our spirit, or things that we have held on to in our mind. If we are to change the outside, we have to change the inside first, right? And in order to do that, we have to have some serious conversations. We live in the South, which hasn't always been this great place to live. We live in America, which has institutionalized systems that segregates and that has raised inequalities amongst certain people rather than others. And in order for us to understand what certain things like race or slavery, often things talked about but never really intelligently contextualized, we have to have a conversation. It's not an easy conversation. It's not a comforting conversation, but it is a needed conversation, because if we got to change what's on the outside, we have to change what's on the inside. So let's get into it. What is race? This is going to probably be a two-part conversation, because race is such, even though it is very, very dwindled down into simple conjectures, it is not something that is simply understood. If I were to walk up to you on the street as a listener, and let me say this before I continue to go on, I'm streaming live on Facebook. Y'all know me. I'm on Facebook, Nuga Radio 92.7, as well as YouTube. The call in is always the same, 800-8949. If you want to call and chop it up with me, 800-8949, or drop a comment on social media. But when people talk about race, if I were to ask you on the street, I had a mic and somebody was recording me, and I walked up to you and I asked you, how was race created? Could you give me an answer? If I asked you why was race created, could you give me an answer? And if I asked you why has race been allowed to be perpetuated in American as well as international society, could you give me an answer? And if you are sitting listening to this right now, and I've asked you just these 3 simple questions, and if I caught you on the street while you were going to get you a sandwich, or you were out shopping, supporting the local business, because that's what we should be doing. If you thought in your head and said, no, I don't really know the answer to that question. I don't know why race or how race was created. I don't know the answer to that question. Then this show is for you, which I feel is probably for 99% of people, because we don't know. What is race? Race is a product of history, not of nature. And as an element of ideology, it is best understood in connection with other elements of ideology and not as a phenomenon of class. Only when set next to contemporary ideas having nothing to do with race can ideas about race be placed in the context of the ideological assembly of which the form even began. Race is not just something that the father of classification when it comes to botany, because it's interestingly enough, the so-called individual who classified plants. I mean, that's originally what his job was. He was a botanist. And I'll give you his name and get into his story just a little bit. But the person who supposedly classified elements of human beings that wasn't even what he went to school for. That's not what his father did. His father was someone who gardened. And this man classified plants, which should be classified into different sections based on what they are, because it's a lot of plants, it's a lot of animals. And so we have to distinguish them in order to not get them confused. But as far as when we talk about human anatomy, when we talk about who we are as individual people, the only thing that we see, let me say this again, the only thing that we see that makes a difference is melanin, or what we classify in America as color. The only thing that we see are different eye colors or texture or color of hair. But with the exception of that alone, if I were to slit a white person, a black person, an Asian, anyone else, if I were to cut them from the root to the toot and split them open and rip them apart, guess what? We got everything the same on the inside. But how did this and why? I think the bigger question is not really how, but why? The why. Why? That's the thing that children ask all the time. They don't ask how, because the how or the means, it's not really important. But how did it happen? How did it happen? So let's start by saying race is somewhat of a modern invention. Race is not something that we've always had. When you look at the relations with Africans for the majority of our lifetime, throughout history, there wasn't really these terrible relations with African people because we're a peaceable people. African people didn't go outside of their country to enslave anybody. African people didn't go outside of their nations, their country, to pillage people. African people went outside of their nations and their people to interact with other people, because that's what we do. You look at, now, some people may be too afraid to go into certain parts of the city of Chattanooga, but if you were to go into any of the areas, we could say South Side, East Chat, if you're not causing any problems, then they may look at you kind of weird, right? Try to figure out who you are, what you're doing. But if you came, let's say you rolled up to a party or something and you had a case of beer, they may ask you who you are and why you there. But they ain't going to deny you too long if you don't show up empty-handed. We're peaceable people. So how do we end up at a place in society where if this wasn't a classification that we had from the start, if this wasn't a distinction that we had from the very beginning, how did this happen? Well, let's get into it. So last week we talked about chattel slavery, and that was a tough conversation. I know I could feel people thinking and absorbing through the mic. Now, slavery was a byproduct of the growing society that we had here in the British colonies, not only in America, but also in the Caribbean. So prior to having this explosion in British society, this explosion in Spanish and French society, prior to having these explosions because of things like cotton, sugarcane, tobacco, and different things like that, prior to having the colonies, which were growing, and the commerce that was coming out of the colonies, both here and abroad, in the Caribbean, it was the necessary need of people to man and do dirty work in the field, which created the need for African labor. Prior to that, we had indentured servitude. Now, this is going back into American history from middle school. A lot of y'all probably have long since forgotten about any of this. What is slavery? What is indentured servitude? I haven't heard these terms in a long time. Well, you probably hear slavery a lot, but indentured servitude is probably something that you don't hear quite often. And unless we do some digging, the reason I have these shows talking about constitutional right, talking about race, talking about slavery, talking about all of these things that have long since passed, but still affect our current society, is because the answer is right there in our face if we'll do a little bit of digging. You see, in order for us to go forward, we got to go back. Let me say that again. In order for us to move forward, we got to go back. And we got to see if we got these problems that are persisting. Now, it makes no sense if you go to the doctor and you got a boil, for them just to prescribe you some ointment or a pill, doxycycline or whatever they're going to give you to get rid of it, but you keep popping back up with a boil. This time it's on your shoulder. The next time, it's on your knee. The next time it's on your foot. The question you need to be asking the doctor is, what's the causes of the boil? We can't treat the surface boil. There's something that is causing an infection to pop up every once in a while. That is race. But race wasn't something that we always had. So in order for us to understand it, and we got to go back. We got to go back to the beginning. We got to go back to the European colonial society that arrived on the American shores starting at around the 1500s, in land that was inhabited by the Native Americans. We know that, right? The Spanish and the French and the English encountered conflicts with the Native Americans as we tried to establish settlements in Florida, Canada, Virginia, and the Southeast. By the 1600s, the colonists had established a system of indentured servitude that included both Europeans and Africans. So pause. We didn't always have slavery. No, we did not always have slavery here. Now, I wanted to talk about slavery last week so we could understand what is slavery and the difference between slavery. We covered this last week. The difference between slavery and indentured servitude. And indentured servitude would often have you work for like 7 years in order for you to pay off any debt that you owed. And then you were a free person and you got to participate in society. And so originally, because there was not this overwhelming work that the African slave needed to do, or that the Native American needed to do, or that the indentured servant that was white needed to do, they were all pretty much equal as far as how they were treated in this society. So when we look at the English society and the colonies that were originally set up here in the Americas, the indentured white and black were treated and had the exact same experience prior to slavery. Okay? Now, it's important to understand that this was prior to slavery. There was no need for slaves because there was nothing for the slave to do at this point. There was nothing for the slave to do. Okay? And so it wasn't until the 1600s that we began to see the colonies are growing and are wanting to expand into territories that were once inhabited by Native Americans, and the Native Americans were giving people hell, as they should. This is their land. Okay? They were giving people hell. And in a particular instance that we see here in American society is that we have a difference of opinion and ideology. Now, when we look at a difference of opinion and ideology and what created this instance, I don't know if anybody out there has ever heard of Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion. This happened in Virginia in the 1600s. And this rebellion basically started on two old guys who were distantly related, had two forms of opinion on how the colonies in Virginia were going to grow. So we have Bacon, who believes that the indentured servants should have a right to the same things as the people who are just common folk or wealthy people in society. He feels that the indentured servants should have the same means in society as the people who already have. If they work, they should have the same right to society as others. And then you have Virginia governor at the time, Berkeley, who decides that no, what we need to do is expand. I'm tired of these Indians. What we need to do is expand the colonies into the Native Americans' territory. We need to get rid of them, and we need to use the indentured servants to get rid of the Native Americans, but they still need to keep on working. And so this causes a conflict to the point where Bacon decides to rebel with the help of black and white. Let me say that again, with the help of black and white indentured servants. Go look it up, folks. Bacon's Rebellion. British. We have not always had this classification of race. There was not always this need for African people in American society to do work. We didn't always own the land that we had here in the very beginning anyway, right? We had to take it from the Native Americans. And then we had to figure out what the heck we were going to do with that land. Well, we started figuring that we can grow stuff with it. And then we tried, after this, to work Native Americans and Irish people and poor white people in the fields. And that didn't quite work out too well. Folks talk about black people. Black people are some hardworking people. We've been hardworking people for a very long time. And the reason why the African was not only necessary in America because they were hardworking was also that we weren't susceptible to the same diseases that had wiped out Native Americans or that plagued British society. All right, just a little caveat. But after Bacon's Rebellion, what we see is people began to understand that the most dangerous thing that can happen is poor people of all kinds deciding that they are going to fight together on a common goal or issue. And in order for us to separate those folks, we've got to classify them, break them apart, and institutionalize the classification in order to perpetuate their differences, at least in what we have created, not in what they actually have. The danger of poor black and white people coming together is that we can actually rebel to the point that we can make such a difference. It is a scary situation when we talk about solidarity. And I talked about it last week. The way to overcome racism is solidarity. If you don't believe me, look at Bacon's Rebellion. We're going to keep getting into it here on the Marie Mott Show. Stay tuned for the second half of the segment.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Chattanooga police say a man shot in the shoulder while sitting in his car early Sunday morning. CPD says officers responded to reports of shots fired on the 2000 block of Rawlings Street. The gunshot victim had arrived at a local hospital in his personal vehicle. 54-year-old Jeffrey Miller suffered from a non-life-threatening gunshot wound to the shoulder. If you know anything about this incident, you're asked to call the police. Jury selection in the trial of a woman accused of a murder and arson in the 2016 death of a Whitwell, Tennessee pawn shop owner begins today in Marion County. 53-year-old Angela Kilgore's trial comes more than 2 years after the body of 72-year-old Valley Pawnbrokers owner Jerry Ridge was found inside his Whitwell business, and suspects in a deadly shooting on Brad Street Friday night have been apprehended. Montrell Williams and Shaquilla Hubbard. A third, Kevion Hubbard, is still on the loose. If you have information, call the police. Val St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News now.
Let's face it, Old Faithful isn't as faithful as it used to be. Constant repairs are a hassle and can rack up quick in money and time. Landers McClarty Ford can fix that. Right now, you can get a 2016 Ford Focus, 34,000 miles, only $11,491. A 2017 Chevy Spark with only 17,000 miles for less than $12,000. A 2015 Volkswagen Jetta with less than 21,000 miles for $11,991. Yeah, browse their entire inventory of new and new-to-you cars, trucks, and SUVs online at Landers McCarty Ford of FortPayne.com. Landers McClarty Ford of Fort Payne. If you can't find your next perfect ride, they'll go find it for you. Big city selection, small town prices, friendly service, and top dollar for your trade. The savings are waiting and only a short drive away, so what are you waiting for? Get started with your personalized shopping today at Landers McClarty Ford of FortPayne.com.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Hello? Who am I speaking with? Eric, you're our winner. Really?
You'll receive tickets for all three races between the Camping World Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Monster Energy Cup races.
Holy cow.
In addition, you'll receive a 2-night stay at the Microtel Hotel and restaurant accommodations at 2 area restaurants.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Nooga Radio.
92.7.
Your NASCAR racing station. Nooga Radio 92.7 FM.
Nooga Nuga Radio 92.7.
Join Nuga Radio and the Gridiron Gang live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks at 10 North on the North Shore. We're talking all things high school football. There's a specialty brew or refresher weekly inspired by the game of the week. Sweet treats, extended hours all season long, and we're pet friendly. Portions of all proceeds support local schools and educational scholarships, as well as after-school programs. It's football time in Tennessee. Join us every Thursday live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks, 10 North, your North Shore neighborhood living room.
Your home is a constant work in progress. Repaint the walls? Yeah, easy enough. Leaky faucet? There's a video for that. But roof repair? You might want some help. That's where Chattanooga Roofing Contractors come in. They have 3 generations of roofing excellence you can count on. Leave the ladder in the garage. Go to chatroofing.com. That's chatroofing.com for Chattanooga Roofing Contractors, a roofing company you can trust.
Hey, Karen, you need me for that 1 o'clock?
Yes, Cheese, please. Karen, did you get the quarterlies done? Yep, they're filed in the cabinet. Cabinet.
Karen, can you describe the initiatives to the new hire? Thanks.
Oh, sure. Full-bodied, some floral notes, maybe a hint of dark chocolate.
Am I in the right department?
Got wine on the mind? Come unwind at Virgola. Italian wine, oysters, caviar, cheeses, and more. Perfect after work or a romantic date night. Virgola Italian Wine Bar, 608 Georgia Avenue.
Man, you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah, I worked with my dad on his truck all the time. Just one more bolt to go.
Yeah, wrong bolt. Today's truck ain't your daddy's truck. For repairs on today's vehicles, you need Amco Transmission and Total Car Care of Chattanooga on Lee Highway. Stay on the road, not in the garage. Amco Transmission on Lee Highway. Get it done the right way. The Thompson Pet way. Yeah, I just put that anywhere.
Now, Rick wants you to buy on U.S. Gold American coins. Are you tired of making 1% on your investments with the banks? Even 2 or 3% at best? Now, Rick wants you to buy on U.S. Gold American coins.
Rick Davis Golden Diamonds, Brainerd Road. Chattanooga weather.
Heating up out there for your afternoon with some sunshine, highs 90 to 92 tonight. Becoming fair, muggy again. Could see a little patchy late fog, lows of around 70. For Tuesday, hot again. Highs of around 90 with scattered afternoon showers and storms returning for the midweek. Looking to buy or sell a home? Real Living Southern Realty provides real answers and customized marketing solutions. Serving the entire tri-state area, check rlsouthernrealty.com for more. And I'm SOAR Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Matt Report.
Nuga Radio 92.7.
We're back for the second half of the segment, and we're talking about race. What is race? Why was it created? Why did we institutionalize it? And why do we need to stop perpetuating it in our society? But how do we do that? Can we ever overcome this thing called race? Oh, man, that's a heavy conversation, folks. That's a heavy conversation. I know it is. Because a lot of us would like to think, that the way of overcoming race, because we don't understand what it is, the way of overcoming race, and y'all know what it is, 800-8949 if you want to call and chop it up with me, right? Y'all know what I do. I give you the basic information, and then I'm just giving you like this thumping thing in the middle of my chest, which is heartfelt. Race was not something that we've had throughout our society, but after Bacon's Rebellion, after we had poor white people in the English or the British colonies here in the Americas, after we had poor white people and poor black people coming together because they were tired of being indentured servants for the British crown, they were tired of being treated differently, because at that point in American society, the indentured white and the indentured black were treated the same. Now, this is prior to slavery, right? But did you guys know that? Did you guys know that prior to slavery, there was not really any need for an overwhelming amount of people here to do work, because there really wasn't a lot of work for them to do? And it wasn't until they came together on Bacon's Rebellion Now, let me tell you how bad it was, because I talked about it a little bit during the break. Bacon's rebellion was so bad, Bacon's militia, poor white and poor black people, took Jamestown in Virginia, captured Jamestown, and burned a good portion of it to the ground. And that scared a lot of white people. And so they got together and said, well, the only way that we can ensure that this can never happen again is we got to give the poor white just a little bit more than the poor black. And by doing that, and then classifying peoples on the basis of inferiority and color, now the poor white will look down on the same person not too long ago that he fought next to and was able to achieve a level of freedom that was supposed to be available to the poor white and poor black. So let me make something very, very plain, because I learned this the first time I went to Las Vegas. I went to Las Vegas out west, and me and my boyfriend, we were at this restaurant that we saw on Anthony Bourdain's show. Rest in peace to Anthony Bourdain. Vietnamese cuisine, it was fabulous. And so because it had been on Anthony Bourdain's show, you can imagine it was a long wait. We waited probably like 30 or 45 minutes. And we were standing outside, and it was me and him, and it was this group of white people and a group of, so it looked almost as if it was a mixture of like very, very well-to-do white people, because they had on very, very nice suits. And one of them looked like he was straight from Texas, because he had on snakeskin boots and a cowboy hat. Those boots were nice, though. And he was talking to some other white people, and me and my boyfriend were talking and joking. We were just outside waiting, and this poor white man walks up towards us. Now, he had on dingy clothes. He was scruffy looking, and he looked like he was hungry. Now, I have a big heart, and my boyfriend has a big heart, and he goes into his wallet and he says, baby, should I give him a 5 or should I give him a 10? And I promise I picked it up in my spirit. I said, it don't look like this man even wants to talk to us. I kid you not, this poor white man who we were getting ready to hand over $10 to, so he can get him something to eat, buy him anything that he needed. It's Vegas, it's hot. Maybe he was thirsty. He walked right past us like he didn't even see us. And then he goes to these white people who are in a group right next to us. And he has this little ring. And on the inside, I felt sorry for him. I did. But I didn't feel too sorry for him, because even though I had the spirit to help him, and I wanted to help him, and my boyfriend had reached, I kid you not, had opened up his wallet, and had $10 in his hand to give to this man if he just said, hey, you guys, I'm hungry. Say no more, fam. I got you. You don't even have to give us. He was trying to sell the ring. He didn't try to sell it to us. He didn't even speak to us. He walked right past us. Didn't even look us in the face, like we were invisible. But he goes up to the group of white people and tries to sell them this ring. And not only do they not help him, then they mock him and make fun of him. And I never see the man never turns back, never doubles back to speak to us, to ask us for any help, never turns around. He goes to the next group of white people. And they don't even allow him to talk to them. And I said that to say this, that even amongst white people, I want you to understand something. There is classism. Now, it may not be racism because if you're white, you're just white. But there is classism that is held above racism in your culture. Now, we get into colorism as Black people, and that's going to be a show for another day. Colorism is our way of institutionalizing some form of class, because that was our way in slavery of being classified as somebody special. If you were my color, you were somebody special. Why? Because that means master slept with your mama and you came out this color. And so generally, because you were my color, you got to work in the house, you got a little better food, you got a little better clothes, you might have an education, depending on how nice master and his wife are. But classism is the way of separating white people from other white people. And it's interesting enough. That's why when we talk about race, we can't just make it about a difference in color, because race is bigger than that. Race is a classification that is also based in class. Why? Because it was the rich of the British and American societies that decided that we were going to classify people so we can ensure that there was going to be somebody perpetually at the bottom. And that's going to be people who are African American. And that we're really not going to offer any more services to the people who are poor white, but we're just going to make it so where they never have to do the brunt of the work that this society requires. And the interesting thing was, not only did they clown the poor white man in Vegas, but after he went away and he kept trying to talk, he only talked to other white people, was that one of the men spit on the ground and spit on the ground and called this man a redneck. Now, this confused me. You can imagine, I'm African American, I'm from the South. This confused the absolute heck out of me, because I'm like, how is another white man calling another white man a redneck? But he was just asking him for help. He didn't steal from him. He was just asking him for help. Understand that for the people who really have in this society, who really have, and I can tell you, these guys, the suits and the shoes and the hats that they had on, these guys had money. I know what rich looks like. These guys had money, not to mention they Maybachs and, you know, the cars that they pulled up in Vegas, but they had money. And still, they felt that another human being was less than them, even though he was of the same race. Why do we have race to begin with? Well, to ensure that, first of all, there's never a revolt, a rebellion, a revolution, anything that looks like people saying they're tired of their conditions, regardless of their color. They're tired of being on the bottom. They're tired of being poor. They're tired of being destitute. If those people ever got together and decided that they were tired of government that helps perpetuate these inequities, because these inequities didn't create themselves. These inequities come from institutions. How do we have inequity in the housing market? You can thank people like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who is held as a white hero. And he ensured, by investing $3 billion in the housing market after the Great Depression, that we have things like the color of law that only allow Black people to live in certain areas and buy certain kind of housing, and crystallize and institutionalize the color of law as something that should happen.
Folks, when you look at the information that David Tullis, and y'all, I'm telling you, tune into David Tullis because David talks about some real stuff on this show. One of the things that David has been talking to me about is strongtowns.org, I believe. I think it's .org. But I posted one of the articles that I read yesterday after I got out of morning service at church was the Ponzi scheme of urban and suburban growth. And we're going to get into that on my show a little bit later. Not today, but for another day. Growth is not something that happens all the time. But our government would have you believe that America is just supposed to grow. And we're never, ever supposed to have any stagnation. We're never even supposed to have any fallout. And the thing that they often don't tell people is the way that, quote unquote, our cities in America grows is by enshrining it with debt. That the foundation of any growth that we have in America, like the foundation of so-called growth and development that we have in the city of Chattanooga, that's formalized in the manner of payment in lieu of taxes. I talked about it on my show. You guys need to look at ATM Chat by Helen Burns Sharp. Get on your job, people. You got to know what's going on. I'm telling you. If you don't know who Helen Burns Sharp is, she is a beautiful woman who has worked within the finance sector, the planning sector of this city, as well as other cities, and spent her own personal time developing the website and putting the information out there of how we as Hamilton County, even though we're the fourth largest county in the state of Tennessee, we have more pilots going on than any other county in the state of Tennessee. And this year alone, we have refused to collect $26 million in taxes, which would equate to $400 million in taxes in a 10-year period. Folks, that is money that is owed to the city of Chattanooga. But why aren't they collecting it? Do you ever ask yourself these questions, but they don't mind raising your taxes? Do we understand that racism is just a illusion, a social construct meant to keep poor people from uniting with other poor people, regardless of if they're female or male or don't even identify with the gender at all, regardless of what their educational background is, regardless of what their socioeconomic status is? They're just tired of the government that they have, the representation that they have, and they want to do something about it in the means of uniting in solidarity. Do we understand what that means? Because it's more of us than it is them. And the funny thing is when I told the city council this past Tuesday that by continuing on the trajectory that they're on, that they're only creating more poor people, which to me means more people who has zero to lose, nothing to lose. And the most dangerous person is someone who has nothing to lose. That by creating more poor people, you're creating more people who have nothing to lose. That if we ever got over race, which is not even anything that is real, it's not real. There is no scientific evidence that states that we have differences as human beings. We're just human with melanin differences and different colors and eyes and hair texture. And that is all. That is all. There's nothing else besides culture. There's nothing else besides culture that separates us from one another. But why do we buy into the practice of race? We buy into the practice of race because it is the only thing that can continue to create the inequities in this society that exist. And by simply adopting privilege, which does little to nothing for you and your next generations anyways, by adopting privilege that you are better than the next person, you are effectively buying into the ideology that we do not need to unite and that nothing needs to change. Now, I know for some people, they don't want us to unite. They certainly don't want white people to wake up and acknowledge it and acknowledge their privilege or their attitude of supremacy, and to check that on a daily. Because yes, all white people are racist. Yes, you are groomed, socialized, and racist. And we talked about it last week. And when it comes to class, you are not an individual in a system. You are not an individual. When it comes to white benefits, there is no white benefits societal office where you can go to a window after you take a number and say that I want to opt out of my white privilege. I want to opt out of the benefits of my skin in this society that has bought into and enshrined race into all of its institutions, from economics to housing to religion to warfare to education to sex and everything in between. There's no office that you as a white individual, a white listener can go to opt out of the benefits of this society. It is your personal responsibility to wake up and say that I am not any better than the next man. And the reality is that the government is out for me too, in the forms of oppressing me, just as well as Black people and Hispanic people. There are poor white people. There are plenty poor white people. There are more poor white people than it is poor Black people. How could you not benefit from standing with other people in solidarity against a government that creates the inequities, that doesn't invest in local economy, whether it's white or Black, that doesn't prop up businesses and institutions? I'm just asking. The same educational system that makes our children ignorant makes your children ignorant too. The data that came out about 17% of students who graduated from public institutions in the state of Tennessee, they didn't say 17% of Black students were only ready for college or ready to go on a job and work. It said 17% of students. That means some Hispanic students, that means some Black students, and that means some white students. I covered a story last week. Luca, who was discriminated against. A lot of times when we think about discrimination, we think that it only happens to Black people. No, you too, as a white person, can be discriminated against. This young man who didn't ask to be born with a disability, he was born with a disability. And because we should be America and have this loving society that has laws that protect people who are born with a disability, it still didn't stop the school system here in Chattanooga from discriminating against him. Race is a social construct meant to keep the poor from working together. Nothing more, nothing less. Y'all know what it is, the Marie Mott Show. Tune in Thursday, the Gridiron Gang Show with Nick LaFew, Keon Rose. It's going to be starting at 7 p.m. at North Shore Starbucks. Y'all know my moniker. No one is taking the time to tell you that they love you today. I love you. It's nothing you can do about it. We got to get over race, but the only way that we can do that is with solidarity.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Chattanooga police say a man shot in the shoulder while sitting in his car early Sunday morning. CPD says officers responded to reports of shots fired on the 2000 block of Rawlings Street. The gunshot victim had arrived at a local hospital in his personal vehicle. 54-year-old Jeffrey Miller suffered from a non-life-threatening gunshot wound to the shoulder. If you know anything about this incident, you're asked to call the police. Jury selection in the trial of a woman accused of a murder and arson in the 2016 death of a Whitwell, Tennessee pawn shop owner begins today in Marion County. 53-year-old Angela Kilgore's trial comes